Well, Donald Trump has come in from the top rope on Canada with a threat of a 25% tariff on all Canadian imports into the U.S. if Canada does not solve our open border issue. He has come in with a tweet threatening this country with tariffs that has sent our Canadian political establishment into a tizzy. Everybody is talking about this. This is the news that is dominating Canadian politics, and that is what we're going to get to on Northern Dispatch today. Thank you all for tuning in and joining us. Before we get into the show, we are going to read out some comments from last episode, and we're also going to give you a poll question at the end. The first comment we have is from Rojas YouTubeification. He writes, $50K penalty on $110 million is a bargain. How about jail time, criminal records, having to pay it back? Our institutions really are insane. What a joke. I understand the frustration. I have to agree there with the frustration when it comes to accountability.
Our next comment is from Ian Leslie 6971. So many scandals, so little jail time. Isn't that the truth? We want accountability in this government.
And the last one is Dieter111. I don't trust anyone in Parliament at all. The swamp goes deep. I feel we will be surprised on who's involved in foreign interference. The swamp needs to be drained completely. So I think it's really reasonable to see that many Canadians probably feel that way after 10 years of the Justin Trudeau government. And unfortunately, when it comes to holding them accountable, you really only have the Conservatives that are putting their foot forward. And but I think there is a lot of hope for the next government, as the Conservatives are already talking about their commitments to implement anti-corruption laws. And I think they may end up being a lot more severe than what Mr. Barrett's C-405 bill is going to be proposing. But the other thing to consider is we also need to be calling out our MPs when they are doing something positive. So if they stand up and say something, if they do something, if they vote a certain way that you agree with, it's really, really a good idea to send them an email, because they need to know when we approve of what they're doing as well.
Well, it was Teddy Roosevelt, I believe, that said the Americans should walk carefully and carry a big stick. My exact language might not be exact, but when it comes to Donald Trump, he seems to be carrying a big stick and walking very loudly. He has come in on Monday and wrote this. I'll read it out to you in full because it really does impact Canada quite significantly. If you've been living under a rock, this will be news to you. He wrote on Monday on Truth Social, as everyone is aware, thousands of people are pouring through Mexico and Canada, bringing crime and drugs at levels never seen before. Right now, a caravan coming from Mexico, composed of thousands of people, seems to be unstoppable in its quest to come through our currently open border. On January 20th, as one of my many first executive orders, I will sign all necessary documents to charge Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States and its ridiculous open borders. This tariff will remain in effect until such time as drugs, in particular fentanyl, and all illegal aliens stop this invasion of our country. Both Mexico and Canada have the absolute right and power to easily solve this long-simmering problem. We hereby demand that they use this power, and until such time that they do, it is time for them to pay a very big price. All right, Ryan, what did you think when you saw this news on Monday night?
Well, it wasn't surprising, but it's always jarring when Donald Trump makes one of his really bold, assertive claims. And I think a lot of people forget what the Trump presidency was like the last time around, because this was the norm. And I think the mainstream media absolutely loved Donald Trump because there was always something to talk about. Now, when it comes to Canada, I think the initial thought after that kind of shock and awe kind of wore off was, if he is serious, this is going to cripple Canada's economy, especially when exporting to the United States. I also thought about how well this actually plays into the Conservative political game right now, because right now the news was shifting into this GST holiday, that Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh have been kind of quarreling over like an old married couple. What ended up happening is this completely changed that news cycle. Nobody's talking about the GST anymore. Everyone is talking about the tariffs. So Pierre Poilievre got ahead of this very smartly, called an emergency debate to happen in the House on the issue, issued his statement, and that's when we started hearing about Canada First, which sounds a lot like America First. But you also can't fault the Americans for putting their country first, and it's about time that Canadians put our country first and our politicians put our country first, because that's what we have seen over the last 10 years is it seems like Canada is last on our government's priority list. What do you think?
And well, yeah, I was just going to jump in there, but I want to just throw it over to you, Tanya. Justin Trudeau he doesn't seem to be too scared about this. Maybe he's just trying to put on a good face to pretend that all is well in this country. What did you make of Justin Trudeau's response, as well as the response from the opposition, as Ryan said, calling for Canada to be put first?
Well, I thought Trudeau's response was weak when we have one of our allies saying there's concerns with our border that we share, and because you're not taking it seriously enough, we're going to be putting tariffs on you. And the Prime Minister just doesn't really take it that seriously. Either he doesn't care, or the other thing, maybe he knows he's going to be gone very soon, so that's why he's not taking it seriously. Now, the Conservatives, I think, put forward a very strong and appropriate response, which was to call an emergency debate in the House of Commons. The NDP party, I think, beat them to the punch, because I think that's whose motion they were technically debating on Tuesday. But the point is that everybody got to participate in this emergency debate, and they were talking about what they're going to do going forward regarding these tariffs.
Well, the other interesting thing is that the NDP took this so seriously that their leader, Jagmeet Singh, was nowhere to be found during the emergency debate. This was so important to their party that their leader was nowhere to be found. Yet he was there just a couple of hours earlier in question period. He was there a couple of hours earlier for his photo op and his press conference out front, but he didn't bother to join the debate. Meanwhile, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives did. And the interesting thing is, so the debate went all the way until midnight, until the actual end of the day when the House of Commons ran out of resources. And they discussed a few things. So they raised humanitarian concerns. They raised concerns about the border security. They talked about the Safe Third Country Agreement, which many Canadians may know from some of our previous videos on Northern Perspective, and also True North has talked about this extensively as well. And the fact that needs to be completely, rewritten, I think, from the ground up. And all of the different support that they're going to need and the strain that's on our system as a result of how we're handling our borders now.
Right, exactly. It just doesn't seem as though that within 2 months, based on the threat that Donald Trump has levied against our country, it doesn't seem that within 2 months, solving this crisis is even possible. The decisions that need to be made are ones that run completely contrary to Justin Trudeau's long-standing agenda on immigration. It will have to bring about a complete reversal of thought in this country when it comes to immigration if we are to achieve what Donald Trump is asking us to achieve. And I also think that the idea that we should be penalized to the same extent that Mexico is penalized over fentanyl and immigration is absurd. There's something else going on here, I think, perhaps a way to bully us into accepting a worse deal at a trade renegotiation. But this is just ridiculous. Yes, we have a problem. A terrorist is 10 times more likely to cross into the United States from Canada than from Mexico since 9/11. That's what we've been told by Trump's incoming border czar. We know that there are a significant number of known or suspected terrorists who have entered the U.S. illegally from our country. We've not been a good neighbor when it comes to the border, but we are a good neighbor when it comes to exporting energy to the United States. In fact, they rely on Canadian energy. So I really don't know why we are being treated the same way Mexico is being treated. A country, in my opinion, that is not a friend of the United States.
Well, and it's a completely different relationship between Canada and the U.S. Like, I think we're known the world over as the two countries that have, I would say, the most collaborative relationship, both in terms of policy and in terms of our economy. So, just Ontario, I believe, does $5 billion worth of trade with the United States. So, that's 10 times more than some of the other trade deals we have with individual countries around the world. So, that's the important relationship that we have with the United States. As for the terrorism aspect, I think Canadians believe Trump's borders are because we narrowly missed a terrorist attack in our own country because we gave citizenship to a terrorist. One that was actually filmed dismembering people online. It was just disgusting what was going on. So, and this is a result of Trudeau's open border policies. Like, let's just be real. And now the Liberals are getting absolutely hammered on immigration. This is the first time in, I think, 100 years that Canadians on the whole are saying, you know what, I don't think immigration's a good thing. And it's not because of the people, it's because of the policy.
Right. And we'll get into the immigration angle in just a minute. But I want to ask you, Tanya, did you see the Canada First messaging that the Conservatives have embraced in the past 2 days in the wake of this announcement by Donald Trump? Did you see that coming? Because frankly, it's refreshing to hear, but I didn't see it coming. I didn't expect them to go all in on Canada First, something I think they might have objected to just a few years ago.
Yeah, I don't think I did see it coming personally, but I think it's a good message because you can't take care of other people or other nations if you can't take care of yourself first. I think that's a basic tenet of even being a mom. You got to make sure that you're okay and that you're healthy in order to take care of your family. And it's kind of the same with Canada First. We need to make sure that we're strong, that we have a good military, that we have a robust economy if we're going to help other countries.
Well, and the other thing I think it shows is that for the first time in 10 years, you have somebody showing actual leadership in this country. You haven't seen that before. So, Canadians have been begging for anyone to take a stand on something. What Trudeau does is he placates to every single group and tries to give everybody what they want all the time at the expense of the country. So when you have Pierre standing up and saying, listen, Donald Trump has the right to put America first, but we have the right to put Canadians first. So I think it was really smart of him to come out with that line because he's not criticizing Donald Trump. He's saying, I respect what he wants for his country, but we should be demanding the same for our country. And I think that sets him up as a very respectable negotiating partner with Donald Trump. It sets up his potential ideology that is similar to Donald Trump. So it makes it seem like that he may be easier to deal with. And it also says to Canadians that, you know what, I'm not going to back down. I'm going to put you first.
And I get the impression, not that I obviously know what's going on in the United States at a political level in terms of Donald Trump's decision-making in cabinet, but I get the impression that Trump respects strength. He respects people who are going to stand up for their own people and their own interests, and he does not respect weakness. And that is something I think that is very obvious when it came to his negotiating tactic with Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland and the rest of the Canadian representation. So what do you guys think Canada First looks like? He talked about putting the military first. He talked about cleaning up the drugs issue in our country. But I think he also tried to hint at what that might look like on a trade level. But one of the things that's obvious in the wake of this is that 80% of Canada's trade is with the United States. We are completely beholden to the decisions of the United States. Perhaps maybe Pierre Poilievre will look to try to, retake control of Canada's supply chains, strengthen Canadian industry, and diversify our trade so that we can chart our own destiny and not be put at the whims of the United States. What do you guys think of that?
Well, Pierre has been talking about for the last 2 years about unlocking Canada's potential in terms of our natural resource. We've talked ad nauseum, I think, across our channel, True North, and then you hear it even on mainstream media about all of these other countries that have been banging on our door for our natural gas. And Justin Trudeau has said, no, there's no business case for it. Whereas if we actually start taking advantage of our natural resources, there is massive potential for the worldwide market, not just the United States. If we are able to actually get pipelines, for example, out to British Columbia from Alberta, there is a massive Asian market that would love for our crude oil and our natural gas. Japan was one of the suitors coming in asking us for our natural gas. So, that would allow us to diversify that, and it would allow us to potentially increase the price that we sell to the United States on, because they will now know we have other suitors. So better competition is good for Canada, but it also will help us in our negotiating position with the United States.
Right. It's not putting all of our eggs in one basket. Something like almost 80% of our trade is done with the United States. And it's great to have a trading partner that is that close with us. But at the same time, if something happens, like if tariffs are put on Canada, then we're in trouble, right? We don't have anybody else we could go to. I think we need to diversify our trading relationships, and that will benefit Canadians as a whole.
Well, and to your other point, Harrison, I think one of the reasons it's 80% is because we don't make a lot in Canada. So we need to be looking at giving some sort of incentive for businesses to come to Canada to set up factories and manufacturing depots. We saw it in the pandemic. We were so reliant on the world market that we were out of almost everything. You could see it on the store shelves. So if we started making more in Canada, that decreases that reliance. It increases our export potential, increases the amount of jobs, and better paying jobs. So, and it also allows us to have much more trading partners throughout the world. So, I think that is what Pierre means by a Canada First approach. And that's not going to, I think, detract from the relationship from the United States.
Right. I think that it may in fact help us, as you point out, because it's economically strengthening our position and it shows that we have backbone. Another thing that I just can't believe is we have interprovincial trade barriers in this country, which should not, in my opinion, exist at all. That is how you handcuff yourself. I want to now move to the other country that is receiving these tariffs, Mexico. And the new president of Mexico has trotted out a line of defense to these tariffs that I find to be, frankly, almost insulting. And I want to read it out to the audience. The Mexican president, Sheinbaum, said that, and I'm just going to quote her directly, 70% of the illegal weapons seized from criminals in Mexico come from your country, the United States. We do not produce these weapons, nor do we consume synthetic drugs. Tragically, it is in our country that lives are lost to the violence resulting from meeting the drug demand in yours. That is shocking, in my opinion, because we all know that the Mexican drug cartels are responsible for producing the drugs that have resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of young Canadians and Americans in our country, reaping havoc across our country and causing absolute devastation. To try to turn that around and to blame the victims in this drug trade and not your own country that is essentially a narco state, I think, shows that we should not be in a free trade deal with the Mexicans. What do you guys make of that response?
Well, you look at exactly what she said. She said, well, we don't consume synthetic drugs. That might be true. It doesn't mean you're not making them, and it doesn't mean you're not shipping them across the border, which I don't even understand how you can say that, to your point, because we've known this for decades, and the U.S. has been working for decades to try and deal with that. Yeah, there's some fentanyl coming in from Canada, most likely as a result of the safe supply that is being taken for free and then sold to people. We've seen that, evidence of that being distributed all over the country. Never mind the fact that the Liberals, would like to deny that, but that's another story. So that doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And in fact, the Mexican population, they're not the demographic that they want to sell to anyway, because the average American is far wealthier and has far more money to buy these drugs than people in the Mexican population.
Yeah, it is shocking, and we do have fentanyl production in this country. We are in fact a exporter of fentanyl now, and not just a net importer. But as I have reported on in my show, the materials used to produce that fentanyl in Canada, those precursor chemicals come from Mexican drug cartels and the Chinese. So again, I find that the decision to turn it around and to blame Americans, blame victims for this, is really disappointing. And I will just say, I just returned from El Salvador. I spoke to a Honduran who was involved in politics there. We spoke about the drugs issue, and he said the same sort of thing, actually, that we should not be blamed. We should not be the target of the frustration by the United States as a country in which drugs pass through, because the demand in the United States is what is causing this issue. Tanya, the Mexicans have responded with tariffs, threatening of tariffs in kind if they are to receive these tariffs. Do you think Canada should respond with tariffs of our own, or should we perhaps avoid getting into a trade war here?
I think avoiding a trade war is probably going to be the best route, because many of our goods do come from the United States. So putting tariffs on things that you need, especially like medical supplies, that's a big problem. Tariffs really only work when you're producing it at home, but the other country is producing it for cheaper.
Well, and the other thing I would say is that unless Trump has lost his mind, which there's no reason to believe that he has, he knows that they are reliant on Canadian, crude oil. So to actually put a tariff on that would drastically hurt, the supply that they get from Canada. So that's one part on that. And although I don't agree with the tariffs, I think that it's actually a good thing that Trump, made this proclamation, because it's gotten our government to have a kick in the butt, because there's all these problems along the border, and people have been screaming at the Liberals about this for years, and it's forcing them to finally take a look at it. Now, I think where this will probably go is if we can at least come up with a plan. You don't necessarily need to resolve it by January, but if you can come up with a plan, then that will mitigate the concern, and you can start having conversations on, what this may look like if there's even going to be a tariff. So, although 25% is the starting position, as we know, Trump is the businessman, that's not going to be his final position if you play it correctly.
Right, and the messaging has changed immediately after Donald Trump made that threat. We now have the Liberals gaslighting Canadians about the strength of their immigration plan, how strong they are on the border, and how committed they are to deporting people that need to be deported, which again goes to the core of Trump's message. In fact, we had Anita Anand, the president of the Treasury Board, say that if you come into this country illegally, you will be deported. And then Mark Miller said to Pierre Poilievre that he is basically attacked Pierre Poilievre for being against deportations and being essentially, he's trying to claim that the Liberals are more anti-immigration and stronger on the border than the Conservatives are. So I don't know what's going on here, but I guess if this is what gets the Liberal government to act on immigration, maybe it's going to work out.
Well, we interviewed a friend of ours recently on our channel named Elijah, and he's a brand expert. So he studies what different political parties are doing. He also works in corporate and helps develop brands. One of the things that he noticed is that the Liberals especially pander to what's popular. So right now, immigration is a concern. Canadians are concerned about people coming in fraudulently from the US when they close their borders. Canadians are concerned about the volume of our immigration. So now the Liberals are pandering to that, saying, well, we're going to deport more people. Whereas previously, the Liberals were in favor of open borders and very loose immigration policies, because that's what was popular at the time.
Well, and I think this just raises the concern of how eerily similar the Liberal strategy is to literally the playbook out of George Orwell's 1984, where, in one sentence, they'll say, we're at war with East Asia. We're at war with East Asia. We've always been at war with East Asia. And then the next day, we're at peace with East Asia. We're at war with West Asia. We've always been at war with West Asia. Just to try to short circuit everybody's brain into thinking, oh, okay, well, maybe I had it wrong. So, but I think the good news is most Canadians are not falling for this.
And I think the deficit is just too much to make up at this point for the Liberals. I did predict this. I'm not trying to claim any credit at all, but I did predict that that the Liberals' position on immigration and the threat that the Liberals and the media would turn around and attack Conservatives for daring to step out of line with the immigration consensus at the time, a year and a half ago. I did predict that this would pull the Conservatives into being much softer on immigration than what the majority of Canadians wanted to hear, to the point in which when it became popular to speak about immigration, the Liberals would try to undercut the Conservatives and make them out to be the pro-immigration party. I did kind of see this coming. I didn't expect it to happen overnight due to Donald Trump coming into power, but now that's what we're seeing, and it's shameless in my opinion, really. Remember, Justin Trudeau, as we discussed earlier, before this, Justin Trudeau told the world's migrants that Canada welcomed them, just to try to play some politics with Donald Trump and to appear as though he was this open border visionary and Donald Trump was an evil, nasty, closed border president. I mean, this is unbelievable. But Justin Trudeau is trying to run away from his record, it looks like.
Yeah, and but I think the good news is because the Canadian population, especially the population that is really, really unhappy with Justin Trudeau, they've been paying a lot more attention to politics, especially over the last 2 years, starting with the Freedom Convoy, right? And they are seeing Trudeau and his Liberals exactly for what they are, and the rest of the Canadians that aren't necessarily paying that close attention, what they're noticing is their pocketbook is empty. So either way, I don't think there's a way out of this for Justin Trudeau. And if he doesn't resign by the next election, it may be a historical landslide election in Canada, similar to how it was historical in the United States.
And, basically, Justin Trudeau has said, well, he's put out some new ideas on immigration. He's admitted fault, but shockingly, he didn't really personally admit fault, but he admitted fault on behalf of everybody else, and said that his new plan is to essentially flatline population growth over the next 3 years. So he's gone from open borders to flat population growth, essentially what many people are calling net zero immigration, right? So it's going to try to balance out the population and try to get us back on track. Do you think that the Conservatives should come out with some commitments on immigration, Tanya? Do you think that it's time to hear some ideas, or is the best political strategy just to say, these guys broke it, we're going to fix it, and maybe avoid getting into the details?
I think that's probably the way they're going to do it for now. Stephen Harper did caution Pierre Poilievre about releasing his platform ahead of time. So I think that the Conservatives will stay vague with their statements for now. And then as soon as an election is called, we're going to know exactly what they're going to be doing with their immigration numbers.
Yeah, and I think that's what that is going to be, is similar to what he's hinted at, which is tying immigration to the system capacity. And that's going to be housing, education, healthcare, what have you. So I think we're going to see numbers from the Conservative government that are essentially one house for every 2 Canadians that are coming into the country. That's probably what we're going to see.
And when that initial commitment came out, and I'm not sure if it would be a commitment, more of just a general policy position about tying it to demand. I was critical at the time because you can simply determine what the demand is if you are in charge. You can say, well, the demand is this, and that means this number needs to be X, whatever it is. And it wasn't exactly clear if the Conservatives genuinely backed a reduction in immigration and thus a slowing down of the population growth. But I think now the situation is such that if even the Liberals are calling for net zero immigration, it's probably safe to assume that the Conservative number is going to be considerably lower. And I think, guys, that plan needs to be honest about removing people that need to be removed.
Well, and the other thing too is I think that because we heard from a lot of people just through comments and online that they were also critical of the Conservatives for not taking a stance on immigration earlier. But I am positive that the reason they did that is they were just playing the waiting game, because they knew if they did it too early, all they would get is criticism from Justin Trudeau that they were racists and all of this stuff. So they lied in wait for as long as possible, and they knew what was coming. That you could see it in the in the statistics. So once everything got bad enough and the housing crisis got bad enough, they waited for the Liberals to actually do something because they were forced to. So it was really good gamesmanship by them.
Yeah, you can be right too early. So I think even 6 months ago, if the Conservatives had said, oh, we're going to reduce immigration numbers when we become government, I think there would have been a lot of blowback. I think there would have been calls that they're racist, that they're xenophobic, et cetera, et cetera. And that was only 6 months ago. So I think they waited the appropriate amount of time. And then I think when an election is called, they'll release their platform.
And as for the extra people, there definitely something has to be done about that, because it shocked me when I saw that we were bringing in almost 1 million international students every year in the last few years. Like that is almost 3 or 4 times what it was under Stephen Harper. So they have to get a hold on this. And the people that unfortunately are a drain on our resources, that they're not citizens, some people are going to have to go, and that's just that's just how it is.
And you know, the reality is that number is very high, because the Migrant Rights Network, they have claimed that the number of illegals in this country could be up to 500,000. So we're dealing with a number that could be, 100,000, but it could be 500,000. And I believe the numbers that are deported in this country each year are right around 20,000, maybe just a little more, maybe just a little less. If we're serious about this is going to be a very large project that the government is going to have to tackle. They're going to have to tackle it without concern about, political capital, because as Donald Trump has pointed out, and I think many Canadians feel it, this is quickly becoming a public safety concern for us. In order to have a border, in order to have sovereignty over your border, you need to enforce the rules. And you can't just allow people to stay who don't follow those rules. So I guess we'll have to see how tactful the next government is in handling this situation.
Well, and it should be a privilege, not a right, to come and live in Canada. And unfortunately, Trudeau has sold a false promise to people looking to come to Canada. And, as we've said many times, I don't blame the people for coming here. I blame the people for advertising that this is essentially heaven on earth and everybody is welcome, but it's not sustainable. And we need to get back to a immigration system where we are very picky about who comes into the country.
I always think the best policy is quality over quantity. We should be bringing in the best people in the world and not trying to chase an arbitrary number. I think Canadians would love to see that from all walks of life and all backgrounds. Let's end it there. Let's turn it over to the audience. Reminder to engage with our poll. The pinned comment on this video will take you to the poll question, which is, do you support Donald Trump's 25% tariff threat? Let us know your answer to that poll. We'll read the results next show. Be sure to comment. We may read your comment on the show next week. With that, thank you all for watching. We will see you all next week.